The chamber hummed with the low thrum of alien machinery, its walls a mosaic of iridescent scales that shifted like living breath. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all, her boots planted firmly on the polished floor that pulsed faintly underfoot. She was flanked by her two crewmates, Dr. Liam Chen, whose fingers twitched at his side as if itching to dissect the very air, and Sergeant Kira Novak, arms crossed, her gaze sharp enough to cut through the haze of holographic projections flickering around them. The Galactic Council had summoned them here, to the heart of the Nexus Station, orbiting a gas giant that swirled with storms the color of bruised plums. Elena adjusted the collar of her uniform, the fabric still stiff from the long haul across the void. Humanity's first official delegation, 3 souls representing billions. No fanfare, no armada. Just grit and a shared nod before boarding the shuttle. Captain, Liam murmured, leaning close, his voice a thread in the din. Their biosensors are off the charts. Whatever this is about, it's not a welcome party. Elena glanced at the tiered seats encircling them, filled with representatives from a dozen species. The Vexari, with their tentacle-fringed faces, whispered in ultrasonic bursts. The crystalline Zorath hummed in perfect harmony, their forms refracting the light into rainbows that danced across the floor. And at the head, the hulking form of Counselor Thrax, a reptilian behemoth whose scales gleamed like oil on water, slammed a claw on the podium. Humanity, Thrax boomed, the translation implant in Elena's ear turning the guttural roar into clipped English. Your kind has petitioned for full membership in the Concordance. But recent incidents demand scrutiny. Kira shifted beside Elena, het Zeitning. Incidents. That's what they called the skirmishes on the fringe worlds, where human colonists had pushed back against raiders with nothing but scavenged tech and sheer stubbornness. Elena met Thrax's yellow-slitted eyes, refusing to flinch. We're here to answer, Counselor. Lay it out. Murmurs rippled through the assembly like wind over dry leaves. A Zorath delegate shattered into a brief cascade of shards, reforming with a chime of protest. Thrax's tail lashed once, coiling around his seat. The void swarm approaches. A relic plague from the outer rims, nanites that devour worlds. They've breached the quarantine zones. Your settlements lie in their path. Liam's eyes widened behind his glasses, but he kept silent, calculating. Elena felt the weight settle in her gut. The swarm. Whispers from scout reports. A cloud of self-replicating machines older than the stars, hungry for anything with structure. Humanity's outposts were tough, but against that? It was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And you think we're the problem? Kira asked, her voice steady, laced with that edge she reserved for idiots. Thrax's laugh was a gravelly rumble. Your ingenuity is unpredictable. Probes show your people adapting weapons from debris, jury-rigging shields from junk. If the swarm learns from you, the chamber erupted. Vexari tentacles waved in agitation, Zorath harmonics rising to a wail. Elena exchanged a glance with her team. Liam's mind was already racing, piecing together defenses in his head. Kira's hand hovered near her sidearm, more habit than threat. Elena stepped forward, voice cutting through the noise. We're not here to hide. Show us the data. We'll face it together, or not at all. Thrax paused, his massive head tilting. For a moment, the scales on his crest flared crimson. Then, with a gesture, the holograms bloomed larger, a swirling vortex of glittering specks, inching toward a dotted line of human colonies. The Council's panic was palpable, a storm of alien fear. But Elena smiled just a fraction. Humanity had stared down worse. This was just another frontier. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat as the vessel shuddered through the nebula's outer fringes. The violet haze outside the viewport swirled like smoke from a dying fire, and she could feel the hum of the engine straining against the gravitational eddies. Beside her, Dr. Liam Kerr fidgeted with his data pad, his fingers tapping in nervous rhythm. This interference is worse than the simulations, he muttered, his voice steady but his eyes darting to the console where warning lights flickered. Across from them, Ambassador Kira Novak leaned forward, her posture unyielding. She was the picture of calm resolve, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun that matched the precision of her diplomatic training. Stay focused, Liam. The Council's beacon is just ahead. We've come too far to let a little cosmic weather rattle us. Her words carried the weight of command, honed from years negotiating with fractious human colonies. But Elena caught the subtle clench of Kira's jaw, a tell that only someone who'd served with her for a decade would notice. The shuttle bucked again, harder this time, and Elena's training kicked in. She unstrapped and moved to the pilot station, where Ensign Raj Patel wrestled with the controls. "Compensate with the auxiliary thrusters," she said, her voice cutting through the alarms. Raj nodded, sweat beading on his forehead, and flipped a series of switches. The ship groaned but stabilized, pulling free from the nebula's grasp into clearer space. There, gleaming against the starfield, floated the Orion station, a colossal ring of alien architecture, its spires twisting like frozen flames. As they docked, the airlock cycled with a hiss, and the trio stepped into the receiving chamber. The air was cooler than expected, laced with a metallic tang that Elena's suit filters struggled to mask. A delegation of council representatives waited, towering vexery with their iridescent scales, a cluster of diminutive sylphs hovering on anti-grav pads, and the stoic form of a single Krogan enforcer, its armored bulk dominating the space. Their leader, a vexery named Thaler, inclined his head in a gesture that passed for a bow among his kind. "Ambassadors of humanity," he intoned, his voice a resonant chime through the translator. "The council welcomes you, though your timing stirs unease." Kira stepped forward first, extending a hand in the universal human gesture. Thaler hesitated, then clasped it briefly, his scales rippling with what Elena guessed was discomfort. "We've prepared our presentation," Kira said, her tone even. "A demonstration of human adaptability in crisis. It will address the recent border skirmishes with the Zorith Collective." Thaler's compound eyes narrowed. "The Council is aware of your species' reputation for improvisation. But proceed with caution. The chamber awaits." They followed the delegation through corridors lined with holographic murals depicting galactic history, vast fleets clashing, worlds blooming under terraforming lights. Liam whispered to Elena as they walked, "Did you see his reaction? They're already on edge. Our intel said the Zorith raid wiped out 3 outposts last cycle. If we can't show them, we're not just another fragile newcomer." Elena squeezed his arm. "We will. Remember the Sims on Titan? We turned a hull breach into a weapon." Her words were meant to bolster, but inside, doubt gnawed. The stakes here weren't simulated. Failure could doom human expansion into the core worlds. The chamber doors parted, revealing a vast amphitheater ringed by tiered seats filled with hundreds of alien delegates. At the center stood a raised platform, equipped with interface nodes for holographic projections. Kira took her place, signaling Elena and Liam to flank her. As the lights dimmed and the council's murmur hushed, she activated the first hologram, a replay of the Zorith attack on a neutral outpost, flames erupting from breached domes as sleek raiders darted away unscathed. "This is the threat we face," Kira began, her voice projecting clear and firm. "But humanity doesn't yield to shadows." She nodded to Liam, who synced his datapad to the system. The hologram shifted, overlaying human response protocols. Adaptive shields deploying in real time, crews rerouting power with makeshift ingenuity. The delegates leaned forward, a ripple of chittering discussion spreading. Then, without warning, the platform jolted. Alarms blared from hidden speakers, and the hologram glitched into static. Thaler rose from his seat, his scales flaring crimson. "What is this? Sabotage?" Elena's heart raced as she scanned the chamber. No Zorith agents in sight, but the timing was too perfect. Liam cursed under his breath, fingers flying over his pad to stabilize the feed. "It's an EMP pulse, target it. Someone doesn't want us talking." Kira's eyes met Elena's, a silent command passing between them. Elena moved swiftly to the platform's underbelly, prying open an access panel with her multi-tool. Wires sparked within, a deliberate cut exposing the vulnerability. "We can bypass it," she called out, her voice steady amid the rising chaos. "Raj, get the shuttle's spare modulator down here, now." As the enforcer Krogan lumbered toward them, its hand on its weapon, Kira raised her palms placatingly. "This is no accident, Thaler. But we'll fix it. Let us prove our worth, not just in words but in action." The chamber's tension thickened like the nebula they just escaped, every eye on the humans scrambling to salvage their moment. Elena worked faster, sweat stinging her eyes, knowing that one wrong connection could end their bid before it truly began. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat as the vessel shuddered through the nebula's outer fringes. The violet haze outside the viewport swirled like living smoke, distorting the stars into fractured jewels. Beside her, Dr. Liam Kerr fidgeted with his data pad, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the screen. "This interference is worse than the simulations," he muttered, his voice steady but edged with caution, the mark of a scientist who'd seen too many variables turn volatile. Across the narrow cabin, Ambassador Nira Thal leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts projected on the bulkhead. She was the witty one, always quick with a quip to cut tension, but now her lips pressed into a thin line. "If the Council's beacon is masking their signal in this soup, we're flying blind. One wrong vector and we kiss goodbye to diplomacy." Her words hung in the air, light but pointed, as the shuttle's engines hummed a low protest against the gravitational eddies. The external challenge had hit them hours ago, a sudden ion storm from the nebula's core, scrambling all long-range comms and forcing the human delegation into a manual approach. No automated docking, no fleet escorts, just their small team navigating by star charts and gut instinct. The stakes weren't abstract. Failure here meant humanity's first real shot at Galactic Alliance could unravel, leaving Earth isolated amid whispers of weakness. Ilara punched in a course correction, her brave resolve showing in the set of her jaw. "We've got redundant NAV systems. Trust the backups." The shuttle bucked again, lights flickering as a surge rippled through the hull. Liam glanced up, his cautious nature urging him to speak. "Captain, the storm's density is climbing. If we push deeper without recalibrating the shields," a sharp alarm blared, cutting him off. Red warnings flashed, structural integrity at 87%. Nira swore under her breath, unstrapping to brace against the console. "That's our early plan failing spectacularly. Manual override now or we become nebula debris." Ilara nodded, hands flying over the controls. Sweat beaded on her forehead but her voice stayed even. "Liam, reroute power to forward deflectors." Nira, eyes on the scopes, "Call out any council signatures." The team moved as one, a quiet camaraderie born of shared peril. The shuttle dove into a thicker plume, engine straining, the violet glow bathing their faces in eerie light. As the storm intensified, a faint pulse echoed through the sensors. Not interference but something deliberate. Nira's eyes widened. There, bearing 240 Mark 15. "Is them but weak. They're signaling for help." The realization sank in. The Council wasn't waiting in safety, they were trapped, their own tech failing against the nebula's fury. Ilara adjusted course, the shuttle groaning under the strain. "We're going in. Hold tight." The viewport filled with swirling chaos, a single clear image emerging, a distant silhouette of the Council's flagship, limbed in crackling energy, adrift like a wounded beast. The risk sharpened. Rescuing them meant exposing their own fragile hull, but turning back would doom the talks before they began. Liam secured the last power link, his hands steady now. "Shields at partial. It'll hold for a bit." Nira flashed a grim smile. "Human grit versus cosmic tantrum. Let's see who blinks first." The shuttle closed the gap, tension coiling tighter with each passing second, the nebula's heart pulsing around them like a challenge unmet. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat as the vessel shuddered through the nebula's fringe. The violet haze outside the viewport swirled like ink in water, but her mind was on the Council's transmission looping in her earpiece. "Ambassadors, your proposal is unorthodox," the alien voice had droned, laced with that synthetic politeness all xenodiplomats favored. Unorthodox. That was code for humans are at it again. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. He was the cautious one, always double-checking data before leaping. "The atmospheric readings are stabilizing," he said, voice steady despite the faint tremor in his hands. "But if we don't reinforce the habitat seals soon, we'll lose the lower decks to pressure leaks." Ilara nodded, her jaw set. The external challenge had hit them 2 cycles ago. A rogue plasma storm from the nebula, frying half the Council's orbital station and stranding their delegation. The other species had panicked, their fragile biodomes cracking under the ion barrage. Humans though. Their ship, the Endurance, was built for grit, modular hulls, redundant systems, and a crew that thrived on improvisation. Status on the repair bots? She asked, unstrapping and floating toward the engineering console. Weightlessness made every movement deliberate, a dance against the void. Lieutenant Mira Jax, the witty engineer with a scar tracing her cheek from some forgotten skirmish on Mars, patched in from the lower bay. Her face appeared holographic, grease-streaked and grinning. Bots are en route, Cap. But these Xeno alloys are a nightmare, too brittle. One wrong torque and poof, confetti. Elara allowed a thin smile. Myra's humor cut tension like a laser. Adapt. Use the graphene weaves from our stores. It'll hold. The shuttle docked with a metallic kiss, and they cycled through the airlock into the station's core. Alarms blared softly in the distance, a chorus of urgency. The council chamber loomed ahead, its transparent walls revealing a tableau of chaos. Insectoid delegates from the Vexery scuttling in circles, their mandibles clicking in distress. The avian Krell perched on perches, feathers ruffled and eyes wide. Even the stoic silicon-based Grom were emitting low-frequency hums of alarm. Ambassador Thorn waited by the entrance, his suit impeccable despite the flickering lights. He was the brave heart of their team, the one who'd volunteered for this posting when the galaxy still whispered about humanity's reckless expansion. Elara, he greeted, clasping her forearm in the old Earth way. The council's fracturing. The Vexery want to evacuate to their homeworld. The Krell are demanding we surrender the station to automated protocols. Kai stepped forward, tablet in hand. Evacuation's not viable. The storm's expanding. Any shuttle launch now risks total dispersal. We need to consolidate here. Thorn's eyes narrowed. And convince them how. They've seen our tech, but trust. A sharp jolt rocked the station, lights dimming to emergency red. Elara braced against the wall, heart pounding. That was a hull breach in Sector 7. Mira? Copy, Myra's voice crackled. Bots are deploying, but the storm's whipping up microfractures. We need manual overrides, can't trust the AI with this volatility. Elara made the call. Kai, you're with me to the breach site. Thorn, hold the chamber, buy us time with that silver tongue of yours. She turned to the ambassador, seeing the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Remind them humans don't run from storms, we sail through them. As they pushed off toward the access tubes, Kai muttering calculations under his breath, Elara felt the weight of it all. The council's panic was a mirror to their own hidden fears, but out here fear was just fuel. The nebula's glow painted their path in eerie light, a reminder that adaptation wasn't optional, it was survival. In the tube, Zero-G carried them swiftly, but the station groaned like a wounded beast. Kai clipped his harness to hers. If the seals fail mid-repair. They won't, Elara said, more conviction than certainty. She thought of the Endurance's logs, tales of crews who jury-rigged victories from scraps. This was their moment to show the galaxy what human grit looked like up close. The breach site was a jagged maw, sparks dancing in the vacuum beyond the failing barrier. Mira was already there, magboots planted, welding torch flaring. Took you long enough, she quipped, tossing Elara a sealant canister. Storms peaking, winds at 500 kilometers per hour equivalent. One slip and you're nebula fodder. Elara sealed the first fracture, the graphene mesh bonding with a satisfying hiss. Kai fed her readings, his voice a calm anchor. Pressure holding at 92%. But the next surge. It came like a thunderclap, the station bucking. Alarms screamed as a panel tore free, hurtling toward them. Mira dove, shoving Kai aside. Elara lunged, catching the edge with her gloved hand. Pain shot through her arm, but she held, muscles burning. Got it? She grunted, slamming it back into place. The three of them worked in sync then, Elara sealing, Kai monitoring, Mira reinforcing, like a machine forged in Earth's trials. By the time the surge passed, the breach was patched, the station's hum steadying. But as they floated back, Elara noticed the gash on Myra's suit, a slow leak of air. Lingering consequence, she murmured, patching it hastily. They'd won. Captain Elara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal as the stars blurred into streaks outside the viewport. The interstellar liner Aurora shuddered again, a low groan echoing through the hull like the ship itself was protesting the void. She'd been in worse spots, pirate ambushes in the outer rims, hull breaches during ion storms, but this felt different. The engines had cut out 2 hours ago, leaving them adrift in the uncharted fringes of the nebula veil, where comm signals died faster than a bad bet. "Status, Lieutenant?" she called over her shoulder, not taking her eyes off the swirling gas clouds that masked whatever lurked beyond. Lieutenant Rao, her ever-steady engineer, wiped sweat from his brow with a grease-streaked forearm. He was the cautious one, always triple-checking seals and running diagnostics before anyone else even suited up. Life support's holding at 80%, Cap. But the core's fluctuating. If we don't reroute power soon, we'll lose auxiliary systems. And without engines. He trailed off, glancing at the 2 passengers huddled nearby. Ambassador Lyriel from the Verdant Alliance fidgeted with her translator cuff, her iridescent scales rippling with unease. She was all diplomacy and grace, but out here away from council chambers, her wide eyes betrayed the fear of a species inured to true peril. Beside her, Dr. Thorne, the human xenobiologist, leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his wry smile cutting through the tension like a laser. Thorne was the wild card, brilliant, irreverent, with a knack for turning crises into teachable moments. "Without engines," Thorne finished for Rao, "we're a sitting duck for whatever's stirring in that nebula. Scans show metallic signatures. Could be debris, could be hostiles. Either way, we're not drifting forever." Ilara turned, her boots clanging on the deck. She was built like the freighters she used to captain. Solid, unyielding, with a scar across her jaw from a boarding skirmish years back. "Options, people. Rao, can we jury-rig the thrusters?" He nodded slowly, rubbing his chin. "Maybe. But it'd mean pulling from environmental controls. Risky, could drop oxygen levels fast. And if it fails?" Another shudder rocked the ship, lights flickering overhead. Alarms blared briefly before silencing. Lyriel stepped forward, her voice a melodic trill through the translator. "Captain, the Council entrusted us with these artifacts. If we damage the cargo hold, the artifacts won't mean spit if we're all floating corpses," Ilara snapped, then softened her tone. Earnestness won more than bark. "We adapt or we die out here. Thorne, your take." The doctor pushed off the wall, pacing with that easy stride of his. "Nebula's got exotic particles, could use them. Rao, if we vent plasma from the secondary coils into the intake vents, it might ionize the hull enough to generate a static charge. Push us out like a sail in the wind." Rao's eyes lit up, cautious optimism breaking through. "That's unorthodox. But if we calibrate the emitters just right, it could work. Beats waiting for rescue that might never come." Lyriel hesitated, glancing between them. "Humans always find a way, don't they? Even when the stars themselves seem against us." Ilara clapped Thorne on the shoulder. "Damn right. Suit up, team. We've got a ship to save." They moved as one, the deck vibrating underfoot as they headed for engineering. But as Ilara sealed her helmet, a new alert pinged, sensors picking up movement in the nebula. Not debris. Something alive closing in. The plan was solid, but time? That was the real enemy now. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the negotiation table, her knuckles whitening against the polished obsidian surface. The chamber hummed with the low buzz of alien translators, but the real tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. Across from her, the Zorathian delegate, High Arbiter Krell, leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes flickering with what humans would call alarm. Though his species lacked the glands for sweat, the subtle dilation of his irises betrayed him. "Ambassador Voss," Krell intoned, his voice a synthesized rumble through the comms, "your proposal to integrate human propulsion tech into the Alliance fleet is unprecedented. But the risks?" Ilara cut him off with a raised hand, her smile steady, the one she'd practiced in the mirror back on the Endurance. It wasn't predatory, just confident, the kind that said she knew something they didn't. "High Arbiter, we've run the simulations. Your warp coils are efficient, but fragile. Our inertial dampeners? They turn a potential catastrophe into a Tuesday commute." Beside her, Dr. Liam Reyes stifled a chuckle, adjusting his tablet. The physicist's wiry frame belied his sharp mind. He'd been the one to jury-rig the prototype demo earlier that week, when the Council's sabotage attempt nearly fried their shuttle. Now he tapped a sequence, projecting a holographic schematic that bloomed in the chamber's center. a sleek human engine mesh overlaying a Zorathian hull. The other delegates shifted uneasily. The avian Lyraxi envoy ruffled her feathers, a sign of distress in her culture, while the hulking Grun representative grunted, his armored hide rippling. Ilara caught Liam's eye. He nodded subtly. They'd prepared for this pushback. The council had been dragging their feet on admitting humanity fully, citing instability, after the border skirmishes with the Vexery. But Ilara's team had turned those skirmishes into proof of human grit, rescuing 2 Alliance outposts with nothing but a battered frigate and sheer audacity. Krell's mandibles clicked. Your ingenuity is noted, but the Vexery advance on Sector 7. If we adopt this now without full vetting, then vet it in the field, Ilara said, her voice level, leaning into the earnest pull of adventure that had drawn her to this posting. She gestured to the hollow, where simulated debris fields parted like mist under the hybrid drive. We've got a convoy en route. Let us lead the escort. If it works, you get your miracle. If not. She let the words hang, the risk implicit, their lives on the line, a tangible stake in the void. Liam leaned in, his whisper barely audible over the chamber's din. They're panicking because they know we're right. The math doesn't lie. Ilara nodded, suppressing a grin. Outside, through the viewport, the stars wheeled lazily, indifferent to the politics below. But down here, in the heart of the Alliance core, humanity's ambassadors were rewriting the rules, one calculated gamble at a time. The vote came swiftly after that, a murmur of assents rippling through the assembly. Krell's eyes dimmed, resignation etching his exoskeleton. As the chamber emptied, Ilara and Liam lingered, reviewing the schematics. Chapter 6 in the books, Liam murmured, packing his gear. But the real test's out there. She glanced at the stars again, the weight of command settling like an old friend. The convoy waited, and with it, the Vexery shadow creeping closer. No turning back now. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's command chair, her knuckles whitening as the hull shuddered under another barrage of plasma fire. The view screen flickered with static, showing the debris field ahead, a graveyard of shattered alien vessels from the initial skirmish. Her crew, a tight-knit trio of humans who'd survived worse than this fringe skirmish with the Vorith raiders, exchanged glances. Lieutenant Marco Reyes, the wiry engineer with a perpetual smirk, punched coordinates into the NAV console. Beside him, Dr. Lena Hart, the xenobiologist whose calm demeanor hid a spine of steel, monitored the sensor sweeps for any sign of the Council's reinforcements. They're flanking us, Marco said, his voice steady despite the alarms blaring. That Vorith cruiser is cutting off our escape vector. If we don't improvise, we're scrap in 5 minutes. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through the options. The Galactic Council had sent them as ambassadors to negotiate peace with the Vorith, a nomadic warrior species who'd been raiding border worlds. But talks had collapsed hours ago, and now the humans were caught in the crossfire, their shuttle the only diplomatic vessel left intact. The Council species, those fragile, long-lived bureaucrats from the core worlds, were panicking back at the station, their transmissions a cacophony of pleas and orders. Humans, though, they adapted. Lena, any weak points in their shields? Ilara asked, leaning forward. The doctor tapped her tablet, her fingers flying. Their port side, it's thinner there, probably from earlier damage. But we'll need to get close. Real close. Marco chuckled dryly. Suicide run? My favorite. Ilara's jaw set. She'd led teams through asteroid storms and viral outbreaks on colony outposts. This was just another puzzle. Helm, plot a slingshot around that asteroid fragment. Use the debris for cover. Marco, prep the jury-rigged EMP from the auxiliary power. It'll fry their sensors for a window, enough to slip past. The shuttle lurched as they dove into the field, chunks of metal pinging off the reinforced hull like hail. Ilara felt the G-forces press her back, but she kept her eyes on the screen. The Vorith ship loomed, its jagged spines glowing with energy weapons. A burst of fire grazed their starboard wing, sparking warnings across the board. Shields at 40%, Marco reported, sweat beading on his forehead. He yanked a panel open, wires sparking as he connected the makeshift device. EMP charging. But if this backfires, we're blind too. Lena glanced up, her voice cutting through the tension. It won't. Humans built redundancies into everything. Trust the grit. Ilara trusted her team more than the Council's fancy tech. Those aliens with their neural links and hive minds crumbled under pressure, always delegating, never dirtying their appendages. But humans? They thrived on the edge. The shuttle whipped around the asteroid, engines screaming. Marco hit the trigger. A pulse of blue energy rippled out, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in effect. The Vorath cruiser's weapons stuttered, lights flickering across its hull. Now! Ilara barked. They surged forward, weaving through the expanding debris. Alarms wailed as another shot clipped them, but they broke free, the raider ship listing helplessly in the EMP's wake. Marco whooped, slapping the console. We did it. Clear path to the rendezvous. Ilara exhaled, allowing a small smile. But the sensors pinged, a distress beacon from the Council station. The Vorath weren't done. Reinforcements were inbound and the diplomats were trapped. Their clever dodge had bought time, but the real fight was just heating up. As the shuttle accelerated towards safety, Ilara wondered how long the Council's panic would last before they saw what humans could really do. The chamber hummed with the low vibration of the Council's translation fields, but the air felt thicker now, charged like the moments before a storm on old Earth. Across from her, the Zorathian delegate, Crix, flickered his bioluminescent frills in agitation, a sign she'd learned meant escalating frustration. The other ambassadors, from the rigid crystalline Vexari to the fluid, ever-shifting Gelari, leaned in, their forms casting erratic shadows under the floating lumen orbs. We cannot accommodate this delay, Crix rasped through the translator, his mandibles clicking sharply. The rift anomaly grows by the hour. Your human vessel's modifications, they must interface now or the fleet perishes. Ilara met his gaze steadily, her mind racing through the diagnostics from the shuttle bay. The Andromeda's core drive, jury-rigged with human fusion tech and alien warp coils, had held during the initial tests. But the latest scan showed microfractures in the containment field, a risk no one had anticipated when they volunteered humanity's flagship for this desperate alliance gambit. One wrong pulse, and the ship could tear itself apart, taking the Council's armada with it. Lieutenant Marco Reyes, her second-in-command, stood at her shoulder, his tablet clutched like a shield. He was the cautious one, always double-checking protocols, but now his jaw was set in that determined line she knew meant he was already 3 steps ahead. "Captain," he murmured, just loud enough for her earpiece, "the patch we uploaded from the engine room, it's stabilizing, but we need another cycle to verify. If we push the interface without it, we're gambling with the whole sector." She nodded fractionally, buying time. "Delegate Crix, we appreciate the urgency. The Zorathian fleet's position is precarious, we all see that. But rushing the integration could cascade the anomaly right into your shields. Give us the hour, our engineers are adapting the protocols as we speak." The Gelari ambassador, a swirling mass of translucent tendrils, pulsed with iridescent concern. "Human adaptability is your creed, Ambassador Voss. Yet the Council observes hesitation. Is this not the ingenuity you promised?" Ilara forced a smile, the kind that had disarmed skeptical diplomats back on Luna Station. It wasn't bravado, it was the grit drilled into every spacer from the Academy. Humans didn't conquer stars with raw power, they outthought them. Ingenuity means getting it right the first time, not just fast. Trust us on this. In the corridor outside, away from the chamber's watchful eyes, Marco pulled her aside as the doors hissed shut. Technician Lena Hart joined them, wiping grease from her hands on her jumpsuit, her witty spark dimmed by exhaustion but not extinguished. "Boss, the fractures are from the warp coil's resonance clashing with our plasma injectors. I MacGyvered a dampener using spare conduit tubing and a phase modulator, old-school human hack, nothing fancy. But it needs testing in sims before we link to the fleet's net." Marco frowned, rubbing his chin. "Sims take 20 minutes. The Council's pushing for immediate sync. If the anomaly spikes, it will," Lena cut in, her voice steady despite the shadows under her eyes. "Sensors show it's accelerating. But if we don't adapt, the rift swallows the Zorathian vanguard. 3,000 souls gone." Ilara waited, the weight of first contact pressing down. Humanity's entry into the Galactic Council hinged on this, proving they weren't just another aggressive upstart, but partners who could turn the tide. She tapped her comm engineering heart here. "Run the dampener through full sim." Marco, Get me a backchannel to the Vexery rep, their lattice tech might buffer the interface. As they moved, the ship shuddered faintly, a reminder of the void beyond. Alarms chirped softly in the bulkhead panels, the anomalies pulled tugging at the hull like invisible fingers. Ilara glanced at her team, the unspoken bond forged in zero-G drills and late-night strategy sessions. No speeches, just action. Back in the chamber, Crix's frills dimmed as Ilara re-entered, Marco and Lena flanking her like sentinels. "We've isolated the issue," she announced, projecting the sim data onto the hollow table. Lines of code and energy waveforms danced, human ingenuity rendered in stark blues and greens against the alien overlays. A resonance mismatch. "Our fix integrates your coil harmonics with our containment fields. Seamless, but it requires one precise adjustment." The council murmured, forms shifting uneasily. The Vexery's facets gleamed as their ambassador extended a probe interface, syncing with Marco's tablet. "Your lattice proposal, viable. Proceed." Tension coiled as the link initiated. The chamber's lights flickered, the anomalies' roar building in the distance like thunder. Ilara held her breath, watching the readouts climb. A spike. Then the dampener kicked in, smoothing the curve. The fleet's icons on the display steadied, pulling back from the rift's maw. Crix's mandibles stilled. "It holds." But as cheers rippled through the chamber, Ilara's console pinged a secondary alert. The fix had worked, but at a cost. The Andromeda's auxiliary power was rerouted, leaving their defenses thin. The council might celebrate, but out here in the black, vulnerability was just another hazard to outmaneuver. She exchanged a glance with Marco and Lena. The adventure pressed on, one clever step at a time. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold alloy. Below, the council chamber swirled in chaos. Delegates from a dozen worlds scrambling like startled insects, their holographic displays flickering with dire warnings. The asteroid field's gravitational anomalies had torn a gash in the station's hull, and now venting atmosphere carried away precious oxygen reserves. But Elena's focus wasn't on the panic, it was on Marcus, hunched over a makeshift console in the adjacent engineering bay, his fingers dancing across the alien interface like it was a familiar piano. "Talk to me, Marcus," she said into her comm, her voice steady despite the faint tremor in her chest. The air recyclers hummed erratically, pulling in the metallic tang of exposed wiring. He didn't look up, sweat beading on his forehead under the emergency lights. "The patch is holding, for now. But their tech's rejecting our sealant. It's like trying to glue water to a wall. We need a bypass, something to reroute the power without frying the whole grid." Elena glanced at the viewport, where jagged rocks tumbled lazily in the void, each one a potential battering ram. The council had frozen in indecision, their vaunted unity fracturing as accusations flew. The Zorathian delegates' tentacles writhed in agitation, while the avian creel squawked orders that no one followed. Humans adapted. She remembered the briefings back on Earth. "They'll see us as primitives. Prove them wrong." "Use the auxiliary thrusters," she suggested, recalling the station schematics from the hurried download. "Repurpose them for a magnetic seal. It'll draw more juice, but it could stabilize the field long enough to weld the breach." Marcus paused, his cautious nature warring with the urgency. He was the thinker, the one who triple-checked every bolt, but time was a luxury they didn't have. "Risky. If it backfires, we lose containment entirely." He met her eyes through the glass partition, a flicker of grit breaking through his hesitation. "But yeah, let's do it." As he initiated the reroute, alarms blared anew, a secondary fracture spiderwebbing across the lower decks. Elena's mind raced. The council's panic had delayed evacuation protocols. Half the delegates were still dithering over protocol while their aides herded them toward shuttles. She couldn't wait. "I'm going down to seal it manually," she told him, already moving toward the access hatch. "Elena, no, that's suicide." Marcus's voice cracked over the comm, but she was already cycling the airlock, her suit seals hissing into place. The corridor beyond was a wind tunnel of escaping air, debris whipping past like shrapnel. She braced against the bulkhead, inching forward on magnetic boots that clanked with each step. The breach loomed ahead, a jagged maw belching frost into space. Through her visor, she saw the council's chamber above, light strobing as delegates finally, stirred into motion. Her suit's oxygen gauge ticked down, 10 minutes, maybe less. She unpacked the portable welder, its blue arc flaring to life against the tear. Sparks danced in the vacuum, illuminating the faces pressed against the emergency viewport, alien eyes wide with a mix of horror and awe. The Zorathian's tentacles stilled, watching. Marcus's voice buzzed in her ear. Thrusters engaging, magnetic field building. Hold on. The pull came suddenly, an invisible hand yanking at the edges of the hull. Elena leaned into it, feeding the welder's beam along the fracture. Metal glowed, fused, cooled. A chunk of rock glanced off the station nearby, the impact shuddering through her bones. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the suit's warnings. Seconds stretched. Then, a soft chime, seal integrity at 70%. Marcus hooped faintly over the line. It's working. Field's locking it down. Elena straightened, the welder's heat lingering on her gloves. She turned back, the corridor now eerily still, the wind dying to a whisper. As she retraced her steps, the council's chatter filtered through the comms. Frantic at first, then shifting to questions, demands for explanations. But Elena just smiled behind her visor. They'd saved the day not with grand speeches but with hands in the breach and quick thinking. Back in the engineering bay, Marcus pulled her into a quick embrace as the airlock cycled. "You crazy brave idiot," he muttered, but his eyes shone with relief. "Team effort," she replied, clapping his shoulder. The station groaned once more, settling into uneasy calm. But the anomalies weren't done. Sensors pinged a larger rock inbound, and the council's unity hung by a thread. They'd bought time, but the real test was just beginning. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the auxiliary engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static-laced images of the fracturing asteroid field ahead, chunks of rock the size of shuttles tumbling in erratic paths. Her team, Dr. Kai Ren, the sharp-tongued engineer with a knack for jury-rigging miracles, and Lieutenant Mira Sol, the cautious pilot whose steady hands had saved them more times than Ilara could count, huddled around the console, their faces illuminated by the glow of diagnostic readouts. "Shields at 30%, Kai muttered, his fingers flying over the patched-together panel. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his voice held that wry edge, like he was critiquing a bad meal rather than staring down obliteration. "If that big one clips us, we're confetti? Any bright ideas, Captain, or are we improvising again?" Ilara shot him a glance, her jaw set. Brave didn't mean reckless. It meant pushing through when the galaxy seemed bent on crushing you. "Mira, plot a slingshot around the nearest fragment. Use its gravity to whip us clear. Kai, reroute power from life support to the thrusters, just enough to punch through." Myra's hands hesitated for a split second, her cautious nature warring with the urgency. "That'll drop oxygen reserves to critical in 10 minutes. We won't make the council rendezvous if we black out." But she input the coordinates anyway, her movements precise, trusting the plan because hesitation now would doom them all. The ship groaned as it banked hard, engines flaring blue against the void. A jagged boulder loomed, filling the screen, its surface pitted and unforgiving. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like warnings from an angry god. Kai slammed a fist on the override, diverting the last dregs of energy. "Come on, you stubborn beast," he growled. They skimmed the rock's edge by meters, the gravitational pull yanking them into a wild arc. Debris pinged off the hull, each impact a sharp crack that echoed through the corridors. Ilara felt the strain in her bones, the G-forces pressing her back, but she kept her eyes forward. This wasn't just survival, it was proof. The Council's envoys had abandoned the field hours ago, their sleek vessels fleeing the unstable debris from the mining collapse. Humans didn't run, they adapted. As the ship stabilized, Mira exhaled sharply. "We're clear." But comms are fried, no signal to the station. Her voice carried the weight of what that meant. Isolated, with the council waiting for their primitive delegation to fail spectacularly. Kai leaned back, wiping his brow with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, that's one way to make an entrance. Think they'll notice we're late." Ilara stood, the lingering pull of acceleration making her steps deliberate. "They'll notice. And when we walk in, they'll see what grit looks like." Outside, the stars wheeled back into place, but the asteroid field's shadow lingered, a reminder that triumph came scarred. The real test awaited on the council floor, where words would be their sharpest weapon. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's command chair, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as the vessel hurtled toward the council's orbital station. Beside her, Dr. Liam Reyes wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over the holographic display projecting the incoming fleet signatures. "They're closing fast," he muttered, his voice steady despite the flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Those Krell interceptors are built for swarm tactics. We'll be dodging plasma fire in under 2 minutes." Across from them, Ambassador Kira Hale leaned forward, her sharp gaze fixed on the viewport where the massive ring of the Galactic Council loomed like a jeweled crown against the starfield. She was the calm one, always had been, her wit a scalpel that cut through panic without drawing blood. "Then we make them chase," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Ilara, plot a slingshot around the station's gravity well. Liam, sync our shields to the human pattern, let them see we're not backing down." Ilara nodded, her hands flying across the controls. Brave didn't begin to cover it. She was the grit that held their trio together, the one who'd stared down pirate raids in the outer rims without flinching. The shuttle banked sharply, thrusters firing in a burst that pressed them into their seats. Alarms blared as the first Krell shot streaked past, close enough to rattle the hull. "Got 2 on our tail," Ilara reported, her voice clipped. "They're coordinating, flanking us." The council's transmission crackled over the comms, the alien envoy's voice a synthesized hiss of urgency. "Human vessel, stand down. The Krell claimed territorial violation. Your approach endangers the summit." Kira's response was immediate, laced with that earnest fire that had won over skeptical delegates before. "Endangers? We're here to broker peace, not ignite war. Tell your Krell friends if they fire on ambassadors, the Council answers to humanity's alliance." Liam's plan had been simple at the start. Infiltrate the station's data core, expose the Krell's fabricated claims on the neutral sector, and force a vote. But the early hack had backfired spectacularly. The Krell had anticipated it, triggering a lockdown that stranded their backup team planetside and drawn this hunter pack straight to them. Now, with resources dwindling, shields at 60%, oxygen recyclers straining from the evasive maneuvers, the stakes clawed higher. One wrong turn, and their shuttle became debris, the summit's fragile hope shattered. A Krell interceptor exploded in a bloom of fire off their starboard side, courtesy of the station's automated defenses finally kicking in. Ilara whooped, a short, sharp sound that cut the tension. "That's 1 down. But we've got 3 more inbound." The viewport filled with the dance of lights, enemy tracers weaving through the void, their shuttle twisting like a leaf in a storm. Kira unstrapped, floating to the auxiliary console, her movements precise. "Reroute power to forward emitters. If we can't outrun them, we blind them." Liam hesitated, his cautious nature surfacing in the furrow of his brow. "That'll drop our engines to half. We might not make the docking bay." But he complied, fingers blurring as he adjusted the flows. The shuttle shuddered, a pulse of electromagnetic interference lancing out, scrambling the Krell's targeting arrays. 2 veered off, confused vectors sending them spiraling into each other's fire. The last one pressed on, relentless, its hull scarred but unbroken. Ilara's jaw set, sweat beading on her temple. She pushed the throttle, the gravity wells pull yanking them into a tight arc around the station. The Krell followed, too committed to pull back, until the station's shadow swallowed them both. In that instant, Kira activated the distress beacon, not for help, but to trigger the Council's proximity shields. A wall of energy erupted, slamming the pursuer like a tidal wave. It crumpled, venting atmosphere in a silent scream. They coasted into the docking clamps, the shuttle groaning as it locked in. Ilara exhaled, slumping back. That was too close. Liam checked the readouts, his relief tempered. Data cores still accessible, but the Krell will regroup. We've bought minutes, not hours. Kira stood, straightening her uniform, the weight of what came next settling on her shoulders. The Council's panic had only begun. Their exposure of the truth would ripple outward, costing alliances, perhaps even lives. But as the airlock cycled, she met their eyes. "We adapt. We deliver. Humanity doesn't yield." The corridor beyond hummed with alien chatter, guards parting warily as the 3 humans strode forward, united in the face of the storm they'd unleashed. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the podium, her knuckles whitening against the polished obsidian surface. The chamber hummed with the low buzz of translators and the sharper edge of alien murmurs, a symphony of unease that had built over the endless hours of testimony. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, his calm eyes scanning the holographic display flickering before them. Ambassador Lyra, the wiry representative from the Vexery Collective, paced at the far end of their platform, her multifaceted eyes darting between the human duo and the sea of counselors below. The challenge had started as a simple arbitration, border disputes with the Krell Dominion, a resource-rich nebula both sides claimed. But it had spiraled when the Council demanded proof of humanity's stewardship capabilities, a veiled test to see if these upstart mammals could handle the galaxy's fragile balances without their infamous wars spilling over. Ilara's team had proposed a joint mining operation, but the Krell had sabotaged it, their drones slicing through the initial rigs like paper. Failure meant humanity's isolation, sanctions that would cripple their fledgling colonies. Now, with the nebula's core destabilizing from the unchecked sabotage, plasma vents erupting like wounds in the void, the Council's patience frayed. The lead counselor, a towering Sylphari named Thaler, leaned forward, his frilled crest pulsing red. Your ingenuity has failed, humans. The vents will consume the sector. Withdraw your claim or face expulsion. Ilara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Not failed, counselor. Adapted. She nodded to Kai, who tapped a command into the console. The hologram shifted, no longer showing the crumbling rigs but a web of sleek, improvised relays, human tech meshed with salvaged Krell debris, forming a containment grid. The chamber fell silent as the display zoomed in. Kai's voice cut through, precise and unhurried. We couldn't stop the vents directly, their energy output exceeds our standard shields. So we redirected it. These relays, built from your own wreckage, channel the plasma into a stabilizing loop. It's turning the hazard into a power source, enough to fuel the mining ops for decades without depletion. Lyra stopped pacing, her mandibles clicking in what Ilara had learned was Vexery's surprise. You repurposed their sabotage? The Krell tech was meant to destroy, not serve. Exactly, Ilara said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. We analyzed the drone fragments mid-collapse. Your alloys conduct plasma better than we expected. With a few tweaks, human tweaks, we've got a self-sustaining reactor. No more shortages, no more borders bleeding into each other. Thaler's crest flared, then dimmed, his elongated fingers drumming the armrest. Whispers erupted among the counselors, the avian chirons fluttering their wings in agitation, the burly Groms rumbling deep queries. One by one their feeds lit up with data requests, probes into the grid schematics. Panic rippled through the ranks, not fear of destruction but of the precedent. Humans hadn't just fixed the problem, they'd turned the Krell's aggression into an asset, proving their grit in the face of engineered failure. The Krell ambassador, a hulking figure in shadowed armor, surged to his feet, his voice a gravelly boom. This is theft. Our designs, freely given in defeat, Kai interjected smoothly, his wit surfacing like a blade. You sent the drones to end this. We sent back a future. Take it or leave it. Ilara watched the counselors' faces, the Sylphari's calculated retreat, the Vexery's grudging nod. Lyra leaned in, her voice a low buzz. You've earned your seat, Voss. But the galaxy won't forget this smile of yours. As the vote tallied, unanimous approval with amendments for shared tech, the chamber's tension eased into a wary respect. The hologram pulsed with simulated stability, the nebula's fury harnessed. But Ilara knew the cost. Colonies resupplied, yes, but now every eye would watch humanity closer, waiting for the next improvisation. She exchanged a glance with Kai, his nod mirroring her quiet triumph. The ambassadors smiled as the council steadied itself, the stars a little brighter in their grasp. Yet in the quiet aftermath, Ilara felt the weight of it all, the lingering risk that ingenuity, unchecked, might one day unsettle more than borders.